All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Kabbalah Coffee. It's great to see everybody this very special Sunday morning. So, I grew up with Barney. That's it. And now you know. By the way, I didn't grow up with Barney, but I grew up kind of around the time, I think, when Barney was a thing. Yeah? 80s? Was it 80s or 90s?
Who's Barney, man?
Clean up.
You weren't in Hawkinsville, Georgia in 1970.
But, remember Barney the dinosaur?
It had one continuous tooth on the top and the bottom.
Oh, did he have one? Was it one
He
tooth?
had just one giant
Oh.
bendy tooth. Didn't have to floss.
I love mentioning Barney because everyone's stuff comes out with Barney. This is not good.
My children listen to him.
You remember the Barney's theme song? I love you, you love me, we're best friends as friends could be, with a great big hug and a kiss from me. That was a kiss, right? I stopped because I'm like, is that what the lyrics were? Purple dinosaur. Purple dinosaur. Yeah, there were like little dinosaurs. The big purple dinosaur was Barney. Then there was Baby Bop, there was BJ, and then there were kids. By the way, fun fact, I just learned last week that one of the little girls on Barney turns out that she is Demi Lovato. Does that interest anybody? No, it doesn't. She sang the national anthem last week at the Super Bowl.
Okay. I missed that part.
All right, anyway. And you thought you were coming to a Kabbalah class. This is the Kabbalah of pop culture here. Hey, Erica, good to see you. Okay. Hey, Julie, good to see you. We decided to bring you New York weather here to make everything feel... Okay, so Barney. Barney was all about... I love how it sounds like I'm eulogizing Barney. Barney was all about... If Barney stood for anything, it was friendship and getting together, which were themes for many kids' programs. The bottom line is like this. It's good to have a friend. Yes? Yes. Whether they're a purple dinosaur or whether they're... Huh? Purple. Yes. Oh, purple. But not a dinosaur. Whether they're a purple dinosaur or whether they are Mr. Rogers. As you said Barney, which Barney? I was thinking, Barney Rubble? Was that a thing?
Yeah.
Flintstones?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's good to have a friend. Huh?
He was a great one.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Yes. So it's good to have a friend. And this chapter that we're up to, chapter 10, in our text, which is all about learning how to get along with others and actually maybe even care about others, right? So chapter 10 of our text talks about the power of friendship. In other words, when we talk about the notion of getting along with others, there's really a few ways that we can look at it. One is at how destructive it is when we're not together with others. In other words, how destructive it is for societies when individuals are fighting with each other, when neighbors are clashing, when families are torn asunder. Right? That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is, let's look at the benefits of what collaboration and friendship can bring. So I want to begin by studying some sections from the Talmud about the concept of collaboration and friendship, the power of friendship. So let's pass these around. Thank you, Erica. I'll take one for me. Thank you. Okay, so the copies are going around. The first excerpt is from the Talmud Tractate Tainit, and the second is from Tractate Yoma. Both contain really beautiful messages on friendship and the benefits of getting along with others and really connecting with others, collaborating in a variety of ways. Oh, and by the way, today's focus is going to be on the power of friendship in the context of our spiritual pursuits, how friends can help us advance spiritually. So let's begin on the first side of the page. At the top it says collaboration. Good morning, good morning. Okay, so the Talmud says, Rabbi Chama. So by the way, when you see an H in this text with a dot underneath it, it makes it from an H, from a H sound to a Ch sound. It also helps clear the throat. So Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Chanina, said, what is the meaning of that which is written? Iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. This is a verse from Proverbs, authored by King Solomon. Again, the verse says, iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. This verse comes to tell you that just as with these iron implements, one sharpens the other when they are rubbed against each other, so too when Torah scholars study together, they sharpen one another in halacha, in the area of Jewish law. I need to explain what's going on here. How do you sharpen a knife? The knife sharpener. What is that made out of? Could be made out of stone, right? There are stones that are, but you could also use, I've seen steel rods, right? That you can use to sharpen a knife. My grandfather was a shochet. Some of you, embedded diamonds. Yeah, yeah, that helps. And I remember, he's not shechting anymore, ritual slaughter. But the knife was it's a big knife. Got to keep it sharp. Anyway, let's get it is what it is. Now, getting back to the to this text. So just like iron sharpens iron, so too when two minds come together, the ideas sharpen and clarify each other. Yes? Yes. It's so easy to seek echo chambers. It's so easy to seek out those that agree with us. But then it's not iron sharpening iron. It's just one iron. You don't have a second iron, and it's not clashing against the other. The process of one idea clashing with the other idea, that process is not a negative process. It's a positive process. It's a clarifying process. It's a sharpening process. Today, we're too afraid, or I don't know if it's afraid, I don't know if fear is the right word for it, but we get very confrontational, adversarial when someone has a different opinion than us, right? And we want to shut the other person down, or we want to, cancel them, or whatever it is, instead of perhaps taking an approach of saying adversarial collaboration is our greatest gift, not our greatest detriment. And when I say adversarial collaboration, what I mean is working with those that disagree with us is actually the best way to arrive at a much deeper idea than either one had before. Let's continue. Rabbi Bar Chana said, why are matters of Torah compared to fire? As it is stated, is not my word like fire, says the Lord, from Jeremiah. So again, Torah is compared to fire, and we have a verse that compares God's word, i.e. Torah, to fire. So what's the implication of this? And the Talmud answers, to tell you, just as fire does not ignite in a lone stick of wood, but rather in a pile of kindling, so too matters of Torah are not retained and understood properly by a lone scholar who studies by himself, but by a group of sages. In other words, once again, truth is not contained within a single individual, within a single scholar. If a single scholar says, I have all the Torah wisdom, I have the ideas, I have the information, then all we know is that probably the truth lies elsewhere. The reality is, fire does not ignite in a lone stick, but rather with a group, a pile of kindling. Such a beautiful idea. This is like the Talmud on campfires. It's like if you want to know how to, this is the Talmud Boy Scout division. Rabbi Rachama is like, listen, guys, important advice. You got to get some kindling together. A lot of different pieces, different styles, different types. By the way, kindling, for those of you that have gone camping, I've mentioned before that my preferred option is glamping, but whatever. Anyway, so camping, so kindling is usually comprised of different things from my limited experience. Yes? Even if I'm wrong, let's just make me feel better. No, I'm kidding. No, iron sharpening iron. I'm looking for pushback. That agrees with me. So, at least in the Chabad camps that I've gone to, which again, I don't know how high level the outdoorsiness of these were. Probably not like the most. Yeah, it wasn't probably the roughest camping experiences that I've gone to. Nonetheless, I remember, you gather some twigs and maybe some other things. I'm being vague here. Right? Some twigs and other twigs, but maybe different styles of twigs. And you put it together and you light it. The next thing you know, you're complaining why it's not working. So that's kind of the way you get a fire started, is by putting together different things. And so the point is like this. A lone log, you take a big log and you take your, I don't know, whatever, 2 stones that you're rubbing together to get a spark or whatever. Kidding. Right? So you light a big log on fire, it's not going to catch. It's not going to work. One solitary piece of wood is not really the way it's going to work. You need a pile of kindling, and so too matters of Torah are not retained and understood properly by a lone scholar, but rather by a group of sages. Lone may be good for rangers, but not for scholars.
And he even had John Toast.
That's right. How lone was he really? Seriously. Talk about an ego trip. The Lone Ranger with a cast of characters. I mean, seriously. Okay, let's get the lies of our childhood. Okay, so let's continue the Talmud. And this is, I love how almost every sage has a ch in it. You think ch is like an outlier, right? Ch is like the exception. Are you kidding me? Ch is the rule.
You clear your throat.
Oftentimes. And this is what Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi, no ch, Bar Chanina, the son of Chanina said. We still got the dot under the H. What is the meaning of that which is written in Jeremiah? A sword is upon the boasters, and they shall become fools. That's what it says. A sword is upon the boasters, and they shall become fools. This verse can be interpreted homiletically. Now, let me explain. There are 2 words in that text that have been transliterated. That appear in the Hebrew in the brackets. Do you see that? Habadim and no'alu. So the reason why they're there in the Hebrew is because the Talmud, based on Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, is about to expound upon this verse and give an alternative explanation. Because although the word habadim can be understood as boasters, it can also be understood in a different way, which gives this verse another meaning altogether. And this verse can be interpreted homiletically as follows. There is a sword upon the enemies of Torah scholars. By the way, that means it's a euphemism for Torah scholars themselves. Those who sit alone, bad bevad, and study Torah. In other words, when it says a sword is upon the boasters, habadim, what it means is a sword is upon those scholars who sit alone, which again, the word for alone is bad bevad. Habadim could mean boasters, but homiletically it could also be understood to mean those who sit alone. A sword is upon the scholars who sit alone and study Torah. In other words, not in collaboration. And not only that, but those who study by themselves grow foolish from their solitary Torah study, as it is stated, and they shall become fools. Number 1, it's dangerous. We're talking about swords. It's dangerous to study alone. It's dangerous to create ideas and to promote ideas in isolation, not in the presence of opposing ideas. It's dangerous because ideas are not tested. Untested ideas can be very dangerous. So number 1, there's a sword there. Number 2, ultimately it leads to foolishness. It leads to erroneous conclusions. When you don't have that type of adversarial collaboration, it leads to concluding things that are just not wise. And not only that, the Talmud continues, but from the sword to foolishness, it leads to something else. Not only that, but they sin. As it is written here, and they shall become fools, and it is written there elsewhere. It's written a similar phrase. For that we have done foolishly, and for that we have sinned. And the word foolishly is no'alnu, which is the same word as we had before in the verse from Jeremiah in the previous paragraph, no'alu. And it says in the context of this other verse from the book of Numbers, foolishness and sin, it combines them in the same verse, which means that foolishness is a slippery slope to straight up sin. And if you wish, say instead that it is derived from here, a different verse, a verse from Isaiah, the princes of Zoan have become fools, no'alu, and they have caused Egypt to go astray, and again that indicates falling into a place of sinfulness. So what's the point? Once again, we see here the Talmud is expressing the necessity, the absolute necessity to have collaboration in study. So the first point is, the opening paragraph tells us in a positive way. Collaboration leads to the sharpening of ideas. Ideas become wiser and sharper and more incisive, and they become better when they are worked on together with those that have different ideas. So when you put together people with different ideas in a room, and they have a collaboration, an adversarial collaboration, if they can get past their own egos and actually have a conversation, which of course is the premise of our whole text, right? That's the underlying premise here. So if they can actually have an adversarial collaboration, which is a healthy back and forth between people with opposing views, what emerges is clarity on both sides and maybe even new ideas that both can agree upon. And if that doesn't work, the Talmud tells us kind of the cautionary tale, right? And if you don't have collaboration, then you should know the Torah scholarship is not going to be retained. And it's not going to be genuine Torah scholarship. And it leads to the sword and foolishness and sin and all sorts of negativity. That which emerges without being challenged is not it's not where we need to be. By the way, the Talmud doesn't just talk the talk; it walks the walk. As we've mentioned before, the Talmud stands alone and unique. I don't know if it's paralleled in any other academic work where you have so much diversity of opinion on the same page. I don't believe any other academic study, journal, book, whatever it is, has so much diversity of opinion literally on the same page. Typically, scholars, scientists, philosophers write their own ideas. And if you disagree, then write a paper against it or publish your own book. And the Talmud has all the diversity of opinion woven together on the same page. And it's not just because they didn't realize that each scholar could have published their own work. That's not why. It's because that's how they collaborated. They collaborated with each other. It didn't even begin for them to have the notion that they should publish separate works. Each one, the book of Hillel and the book of Shammai, each one would have their own version of Talmud. It never was Oila al Daitan. It never arose in their minds to think of such a thing. Why? Because it was never about my idea or my idea. It was all about the collaboration. And specifically seeking out collaboration. Famously, Rabbi Yochanan, who rescued Reish Lakish, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, from a life of crime. His old childhood friend he saw one day, after decades, he was steeped in crime. And he says to him, come on back. And he comes back. And he marries his sister, Rabbi Yochanan's sister. And they become study partners. And throughout the Talmud, there are hundreds of instances in which they are disagreeing about matters of Jewish law. And you could think they probably hated each other. And imagine Rabbi Yochanan. Here he drags this guy back in from who knows where. Yeah? And the next thing you know, he's disagreeing with him. Imagine if he had any semblance of ego. Imagine if he was normal. When I say normal, filled with ego. Yeah, he would say, how dare you? How dare you disagree with me? I'm the teacher, you're the student. You think you're going to challenge me? You know what? Go back to where you came from. If he was a small person that was only fueled by ego. But because he was a true Torah scholar, and he was a tzaddik, right? It was never about him, it was all about the scholarship. To the point that when Reish Lakish died before him, Rabbi Yochanan was terribly in mourning, and the sages sent another scholar to study with him. And the Talmud says what happened. What happened was Rabbi Yochanan would share an idea, and this new study partner would say, yeah, you know what, your idea is so wise. There's a Braita, there's an earlier source that actually, if you look at it the right way, it actually supports your opinion. And he says to him, do you think I need someone to tell me that my ideas are sound? When I used to study with Reish Lakish, everything I would say, he would challenge me 24 challenges. And then I would come back with 24 supports to my original idea. And through that process, ideas were clarified. And you tell me, oh, so there's a Braita that supports your opinion, there's a Braita that supports your opinion. And he went around and was crying, where are you, Reish Lakish? Until he lost his mind and he passed away. That's the story of the Talmud. It ends tragically, obviously, but it tells us the truth about Torah scholarship. That it's never about one idea, one person's position, one philosophy. The Talmud is all about diversity of thought. They weren't just teaching ideas here about how others should collaborate. They practiced it themselves. Open up any page of the Talmud, guaranteed you will find more than one opinion. Guaranteed. And it's all in peaceful coexistence. Not just on the written page, but in the halls of academia, of Talmudic academia, they existed, these ideas, these absolutely contrasting, conflicting ideas existed in harmony. Why? Because it was never about them. It was always about arriving at a greater truth. And to arrive at a greater truth, at a sharper truth, at a greater idea, they knew, and we know this, we're afraid to know this, but we know this deep down, it only happens through challenge. Ideas that are not tested are not wise ideas. Make sense? Yes?
Question, but one. So this seems to be an example of what we've been talking about in terms of an idea, and then breaking open the idea so that you can see both that within that idea there are many different ways.
Yeah.
Can you just weave it back to that?
Yeah, so when you share an idea and you have somebody challenging you 24 questions on your idea, yeah, you have an idea and you think it's wise, you think it's brilliant. Oh, wow, I came up with this idea. And somebody breaks it down, they dissect it and ask you 24 questions. And now you're faced with the prospect of not defending your idea because of ego, but to see if it actually makes sense and holds any water at all. And you have to kind of reconstruct it, put it back together again. You're forced to break things down into their parts, into their details, and to see all the pieces and components, and see which are true, which are not true, which may lend themselves to the opposing idea, and put it all together. And by the way, when these sages disagreed, it's not like they didn't understand the other opinion. They understood. And that's what the Talmud says, Elu va'elu divrei Elokim chayim. Both these words and these words are the words of the living God. They're all true because they stem, first of all, they come from a place of the pursuit of truth, not from ego. That's already a good start. If it's coming from ego, we know it's false. No matter what the conclusion is, if it was about you, then it can't be absolutely true. When it's about a higher pursuit, so it can be true. And the point is that not only do we say objectively, from a cosmic level, there's truth in all ideas, but the sages themselves saw the truth in the other idea. Even though they felt like this was the overriding way to look at things, but they understood the other opinion because they had this collaboration.
Because I was thinking, I'm trying to bring it back here where you're talking about, I think,
Chachma, yeah.
Yeah, breaking it, where you're talking about breaking it out. So I was thinking if this is an example of that.
Yeah, so we said that Bina is really the power of analytics.
Right.
So in breaking it down. But we said in our text that Chachma also could have the power of breaking it down. Or Chachma sets the stage for breaking ideas down, but it sets the stage for breaking ideas down in a way that will lead to a unity. Because Chachma is infused with humility. Chachma is the anti-ego. So an idea, an intellectual collaboration that is informed by, or intellectual pursuit that's informed by Chachma will be about collaboration. And will seek out adversarial collaboration as opposed to echo chambers that fear opposing ideas. Because that doesn't lead to diversity of thought, and that does not lead to sharpening ideas. Where that is coming from is fear that if another idea is presented, then I'll be wrong. And then the question is, so what? So what if you'll be wrong? If it's about truth, then you should welcome that. Because if you're wrong, wouldn't you want to know about that? But when it's about ego, that's where the fear comes in. Yeah.
Are there any examples of unacceptable opposition or conflict in the Talmud?
Yeah, anything that disagrees with me. Are there examples of sages engaging in inappropriate type of disagreement?
Right. Are there any kind of examples of ways not to?
I'm sure there are stories in the Talmud where things are presented in a way that they were less than ideal, and the lesson is to not learn from it. But all the classic, I don't know what the right word is, collaborators or not combatants, but intellectual sparring partners in the Talmud. Hillel and Shammai, the aforementioned Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, Abai and Rava, all of the great contemporaries gave us a really good model of how to get along with those that disagree with us. Not only how to get along with them, but how to welcome the challenge. It's different than, I disagree with you, but we can still be friends. That's different than I actually seek out your opposition. I seek it out. Okay, yeah.
I was going to say the implications of this are striking again, making the sort of education connection.
Yeah.
If you're teaching children and you assume that you're the person who has all the knowledge and that they're
Right.
just responding passively, versus being in a place where you're open to looking at other ideas and you don't always have to land on the exact right thing.
I think it's relevant to mention, we'll get there in a second. You'll see how it comes back to education. In a few paragraphs. 2 more paragraphs. Is there an extra copy floating around?
Yeah.
Thank you.
There was. There was one.
All right, awesome. We got it? Okay. Yasher koach, thank you. Okay, last paragraph on the first page. Rav Nachman, the trend continues. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, oh, you got a double whammy there. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, why are Torah matters likened to a tree? As it is stated, Eitz Chaim Hi, it is a tree of life to them who lay hold upon it, from Proverbs. By the way, it's worthwhile to mention that tonight is Tu B'Shvat, which is Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanot, which is the Rosh Hashanah of trees. So it's a very special day. Tonight is a very special night. And human beings are compared to trees in Scripture on some level. But let's talk about this direct quote, but I just thought of trees and the connection with tonight. So why are Torah matters likened to a tree? As it is stated, it is a tree of life. Referring to Torah, it is a tree of life. Eitz Chaim Hi, Lamachazikim Ba, a tree of life to them who lay hold upon it. This verse comes to tell you that just as a small piece of wood can ignite a large piece, Sandy, to your point, so too a minor Torah scholars can sharpen great Torah scholars and enable them to advance in their studies, providing they are not afraid and filled with ego, etc. Let's continue. And this is what this is a full house of Chaz, and this is what Rabbi Chanina said. I have learned much from my teachers and even more from my friends. But from my students, I have learned more than from all of them. He says, I learned a lot from my teachers. I learned even more from my contemporaries. And the most I learned was from my students. None of this happens when you need to be right, when others need to listen to you, when you have all the right ideas, when you have all the good ideas. You never get past that original idea. And that is, above everything else, a shame. That's just straight up sad. To never move beyond one's original idea. That's it. Stuck right there. The first thought I had was perfect. What? How is that a thing? The Talmud teaches us it's like embedded in the Jewish understanding of scholarship on every level. We arrive at truth. We arrive at greater ideas when there is collaboration with those who disagree with us. When we're confronted by opposing ideas, that makes everyone's ideas sharper, better, stronger, and more truthful. You ever hear the phrase, disagree without being disagreeable? Yeah? Okay, so what's the key to that? The key to that is recognizing that disagreement is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. The sages of the Talmud loved to disagree. They never got disagreeable. It never became personal. It never became like, I don't like you because you have a different idea than I have. It was always, I like you because you have a different idea than I have. I want to talk to you because you have different ideas. I want to hear those ideas because I was, just staying in the first person here so that I'm not making it sound weird, although this may sound even weirder, because in this context, I am not seeking to be right. That's not my agenda here. I'm looking for truth. And because I'm looking for truth, I want to ask you what you think. And I want to hear challenge to my ideas. Because it's not about my idea. It's about ideas. Are you with me on this?
Rabbi.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about people studying the Talmud, I mean, they're kind of, I mean, they may have different agreements, but they're in the same camp.
Yeah.
More or less. And so today we have people who are completely different poles and different camps, and so.
Well, yeah. So here's the thing. First of all, I think when we try to apply the ideas that we study here to a very broad context, it can seem overwhelming. I always think about how can I apply this to my own life with my own ideas, for me. Not how I can try to fix.
Well, I guess I'm thinking about me and friends, close friends who are
Right.
who have completely different.
Right.
Okay.
Who've left Judaism completely.
Well, okay, so there's a few different ways that we can look at this. I think the bottom line is that if one way to look at it as understand what is the interest as opposed to the position. There's a difference between interests and positions.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. So, for example, if two people are looking to have a nice evening together, but they're disagreeing about the movie so vehemently to the point that the evening is ruined, that means they put their position, their very narrow position of what movie they want to see before the larger interest of having a nice evening, enjoyable evening together. Does that make sense? So the question is, what is the larger interest, and do we lose focus of that? So really the question is, what is the agenda? If the agenda is to be right, then yeah, that's going to... Right, if the agenda is ego, then that will pretty much always lead to clashing. If the agenda is to be right and to prove your point, again, that's always going to lead to... The question is, we have to ask ourselves, there's no right answer. Except for my answer. No, I'm kidding. There's no right answer. It's a question. It's an honest question. What is the goal? What's the larger goal? If the larger goal would be for me to say, look, there's somebody that's in my life that I would like to have a closer relationship with, then I can figure out how to. Or if the objective is to to discuss opposing views and maybe learn truths from each other, if that's the interest, great. But that's going to affect the positions that I take and how this conversation plays out. But I'm not losing, and I'm keeping in mind what the larger interest is. Again, if the interest is proving my point to someone else, showing them how wrong they are, that's going to lead to conflict. That will always lead to conflict. If I walk into a conversation being completely, not flexible, I'm not going to change my mind. I'm going to be, the objective here is for me to try to change your mind and to prove to you how I'm right and you're wrong. If that's the nature of the conversation, is there really a point? I mean, what's the point?
I think that would be an example of incorrect debating, like what he was trying to get at.
Yeah.
You're just trying to just force your ideas on the other person, and you're not trying to learn anything. I think that's a perfect example of incorrect debating with somebody. You don't have to like you're not owning it.
Right. Yeah, it's not about learning. Whereas proper debate is really about learning from the other person, and that's really the higher goal. Or that's the goal that's driving this experience. I think in our society today, we don't have a lot of examples of proper forms of dialogue. I don't think we have a lot of, when I say a lot of examples, on a small level, yes, but the big examples out there, we don't really have a lot of public, I don't know, we don't have, it's not being modeled necessarily, which may be fine, but if you lived in ancient Israel or Bavel or Babylonia in times of the Talmud, you would have a lot of really great role models for how to get along and how to seek out diversity of opinion. You would have a lot of role models about how to do that, right? Because that's what society was like. But today it seems like everyone's trying to disprove the other and to shut the other person down. And I mean, it is what it is. But you and I shouldn't become despondent from that, and we shouldn't think that constitutes debate. That's the totality of what debate is and what it could be. We should know the truth, that there's another form, there's another model here that's a healthy model, and that's really a necessary model. So it doesn't matter what else is out there. It's about us and about knowing the truth. Make sense? Yes.
So in the spirit of agreeable disagreement, I'm going to disagree with part of your question. The way you
Good.
framed it, that there's, let's say just using politics as an example, there's two different camps. Well, we need to think about, there's like a hierarchical level of different camps. Like there could be two different camps about political opinions, but we're also part of the same nation, the same, either like, you could say we're all humans or all Americans, in some sort of sense that there's another higher level that we all have in common. And that's part of the problem that maybe we forgot, that we're also part of this group, even though we still have these different camps within the same group, but we're still all part of the same group, that we feel like people who agree or disagree with us are just a different people. That could be part of the problem.
That's what I was trying to, and that's where I was going with the idea of interest versus position, because I would hope that our shared interest is in our collective well-being as a nation, as a city, in whatever context it is, a family, that we're all, the interest would be higher level than the specific position. Once you have that higher interest and you keep that in the focus, you're not going to let the positions outweigh the interest, because that would be foolish, right? Again, if my objective is to have an enjoyable evening with somebody else, and I keep that front and center, I'll never let my specific position about which movie to watch overwhelm the larger objective. And again, I know it's harder when we talk about it on a macro level. I get it. That's why I think we should keep it a little bit smaller. And with those with whom we have a relationship, again, if the relationship is the most important thing, then we'll already figure out a way. Then it's not about us, it's about us and them, and already it's a different conversation. Okay, this is one piece of Talmud that I wanted to study. Let's look at the next idea. Oh, but before we do the next idea, let me just contextualize what we just learned. So number one, we're talking about the notion of collaboration and even adversarial collaboration, to not be afraid to engage with those who disagree with us, but rather to welcome it and to recognize that is the key to sharpening our ideas. So that's one point. But really, the larger point, in other words, the larger interest that I have in sharing this with you, is once again to support the notion of how important it is to have friendships. When I say friendships, I don't mean like someone to go hiking with necessarily, although that could also be the case. But what I mean is really somebody that we can share ideas with and even, disagree with. But that kind of friendship, that sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Comradeship? Is that, are we? Huh? Collegiality? Sounds better and less Russian.
Syllables.
Right, it has more syllables. Yes, it does.
Like what Sandrine is saying.
Oh, what?
Sandrine.
What is it?
She's saying it in French. Camaraderie.
How do you say it in French?
Camaraderie. Yeah. What was it in French?
Camaraderie.
Oh, that sounds so much better. That does sound so much better. Yes. Okay, so it's all about friendship. It's about the opposite of isolation. Isolation is not good for ideas. That's the point. Isolation is not good for ideas. Okay, let's talk about, let's now, second half of the page, sharing. My daughter, Riva, whenever she wants something, she says the line, sharing is caring. She doesn't even say it now impassionately. She doesn't even say it with like a lot of passion. It's kind of like a truth. Sharing is caring. Can I have this thing? It's like, that's my intro. Sharing is caring. Therefore, give me all your stuff.
And where did she learn that from? Where
Sharing is caring?
Yeah. Oh.
No. She probably learned it either from us or from school. Or a combination. Yeah. But it's cool. It rhymes.
Yes.
Sharing is caring. She's like, Ellie, it's her older brother. She has a few, but that's the one immediately above her. She's like, Ellie, sharing is caring. Give me your toy. I'm like, I just literally, it's his birthday present. Like, let him have it for a minute. It's like, sharing is caring. Pass it over, bud. Anyway, it's cute. By the way, if we lived with sharing is caring, life would be a nice place. No? Man, this could be a really beautiful place.
No, there's some things
There's
I'd really rather not share with people. Like
Yeah, I know. But you know what? I don't mean like everything, but if we were more open, right? This is such a beautiful place. I always go back, I always think of that picture from outer space. Right? Of the planet, the pale blue dot. Yeah, the famous, which was the words written by the astronaut who took the picture. I think he wrote like these poetic words about it. Everyone you've ever known has lived on this planet, and everyone who will ever, whatever. And it's so beautiful, and we spend our time just fighting. Why? There's so much beauty here. Such a waste of time. How many years do we have? How many days do we have? And we spend our time locked in battle with other people. And for what?
Our views too narrow, and that's what causes all that. I guess with him being so above the planet, it's widening his view to see that we're all really on like the same thing.
All on the same planet.
It's easy when you don't have that perspective to feel like everything is isolated and all that sort of stuff. That broader perspective really changes.
Yeah. Sometimes we need to go a little out there. Yeah. All right, sharing. Let's do this. Sharing is caring. Here we go. Talmud Yoma, different Talmudic quote. This is a quote once again from Proverbs. King Solomon writes, "If there is care in a man's heart, care." It's really about concern. Care meaning concern, right? Because you could say I have care for someone or concern for someone. Concern reflects more of if a person's worried about something. If there is care in a man's heart, let him quash it. And the Hebrew word is yashchena. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi disputed the verse's meaning, but they disputed it in a very friendly way. But no, they disputed the verse's meaning. One said, Rabbi Ami said, what should a person do? If you have worry in your heart, what should you do? He should forcibly push it, yashchena, out of his mind. Just drive it out of your mind. If you're worried about something, if you're feeling anxiety, try to push it out of your mind. One who worries should banish his concerns from his thoughts. Easier said than done, right? Right? Because you tell someone, don't think about something. What are they thinking about? That thing. But that's the first piece of advice. Try to remove your mind from the idea. And one said, the second rabbi, Rabbi Asi said, it means he should tell Yisichena others his concerns, which will lower his anxiety. It's unbelievable. One rabbi says, push it out of your mind. And one rabbi says, talk about it to someone else. Talk with a friend. And in the process of talking about your fears, that itself will help. How will it help? In our text today, in our mystical text, we're going to understand this on several levels. The benefit of sharing our concerns and our worries and our fears and our anxieties with others. What are the benefits of that? How does it help? We're going to have multiple ways of understanding it in our text. But before we get into our text, I wanted to just establish the verse from Proverbs and the Talmudic discussion about it. And by the way, just because there are two opinions doesn't mean they don't agree with each other. If you're by yourself, try to push it out of your mind. And if you have someone else around, speak with them. Both are true. Yeah? Makes sense?
Could you spell Yashkana in Hebrew for me?
Yeah. Yud, Shin, Ches, Nun, Vav.
And also...
Yisichena is also, instead of the Shin, it's the Sin, but it's written the same way. Yisichena is Yud, Sin, Yud, Ches, Nun, Vav.
And also the other one, should tell others at the bottom.
Which one?
Yes,
The first?
you should tell others.
Oh, Yisichena. Yeah. Yud, it's spelled the same way. Yud, Shin, but a Sin. Or you put the dot on a different side. Yisichena. Yud, Shin, Yud, Sin, Yud, Ches, Nun, Vav.
Thank you.
So it's basically spelled the same way, give or take a vowel or two, but it's a homiletical play on words. Yashchena can mean drive it away. The same words could be reimagined as Yisichena, which means speak it over with someone else. Speak about them. Talk it out. And both are true. We try to push it out of our minds and talk about it with others.
Within the context of this discussion, how does one approach the idea of authoritative figures or authoritative sources? We should all be open-minded all the time.
Right. Good question. In other words, is there anything absolute in this model? Yeah, so it's interesting that the entire context of the Talmudic discussion is with the premise that the Torah is truth, that God's word is true. So there is a premise, an absolute premise.
Yeah, people say according to the Talmud or according
Right. So even the diversity of opinion of the Talmud was all based on understanding the Torah, but the Torah was taken as a truth. And you don't have an opinion in the Talmud that's saying, well, maybe the Torah itself is not true. That diversity of opinion does not appear in the Talmud. So there is a notion of a starting point, but within that starting point now we have tremendous diversity of thought. Why don't we have that level of diversity in the Talmud? That's a different book altogether, I guess. That's a different, right? From this point, we have these different ideas. Okay. Now, let's jump into our text. This is chapter 10. I don't know why I'm opening up the Hebrew, but it's good to have.
Before we go into it, can I ask a question?
Yes, for sure.
So the idea though is that it's too true to be contained in any single one opinion. That's the importance of argument, right? There's no one opinion.
No one opinion will
is big
contain.
enough to contain.
Correct. Truth is so big and so nuanced that it's not going to be contained in any one idea.
Right.
And any one idea can be sharpened when it's juxtaposed against, or when it bumps up against an opposing idea.
Right.
Like the iron that sharpens the iron. It's precisely, thank you, take a pass.
But it's true because it puts it in relation with an idea outside of it that contains more of that truth.
Correct. Yes. I don't know if we have enough copies. As I realize the height of the pile. If we don't, then please share. Hey, we can model the collaboration idea that we're speaking about. Okay, so chapter 10, chapter X. I was calling the iPhone X for a while before I saw people actually saying, oh, it's the iPhone 10. Then I'm like, I knew that. But that's another example of it's good having other diversity of thought. You know what I'm talking about? Yes? Came out a few years ago? The iPhone X?
I think I thought it was the X too.
I'm like, iPhone X sounds so cool. It's like some sort of like mysterious. Oh, we have extras?
We do. Because we're bringing them back.
Shh, look at you guys. You guys are professionals.
Recycling is caring.
Oh, I should tell Reva that. Sharing is caring, though, has such a good...
It does.
But she throws it out so fast. Sharing is caring. So then I'll tell her now. I use this not against her, but with her.
Yeah.
Right? But again, no. So I'm like, Reva, sharing is caring. Can you pass the thing to your brother or something? Like, can you? But like, sharing is caring, and then what do you say to that? Because sharing is caring.
Yeah, right. Does she then?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
She's a fantastic.
She'll save it back.
She's a very good share. Oh, she's
How old
tremendous.
is she?
She's 4. She just turned 4.
Going on 20.
Listen. Kanahara, Baruch Hashem. Okay, chapter 10, page 19. Okay, again, this chapter, the focus is on how destructive it is to not get along in a spiritual sense. Sorry, let me try that again. How destructive it is to spiritual goals. No, let me try it one more time. How destructive it is. How destructive not getting along is to the goal of spiritual pursuits. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
In the pursuit of spirituality, not getting along is very detrimental. Wow.
Yeah.
Sharing is caring. Good. Finally got that out. Chapter 10. You guys ready? Oh, by the way, one example of this is in writing. I can't speak for all writers, but I think that many writers love a good editor.
Yes.
Right? Someone to say, you wrote that, that doesn't make any sense. Or not doesn't make any sense, or it doesn't make any sense. But, to come back with edits and take stuff out and put stuff in, that's great. If it's about getting to a work that's worthy of being read. Chapter 10. On account of our many transgressions. That's kind of a soft way of saying we're not where we need to be. The sin of baseless hatred is found especially among pious people. In other words, it's found amongst those that allegedly are pursuing higher spiritual truths. We find this notion of baseless hatred, which is predicated on ego. Just because someone represents spirituality or whatever it is, doesn't mean that they necessarily don't have an ego. And if they have an ego, that can be very devastating and destructive in the pursuit of spiritual truths. And he's now lamenting what we see amongst those that should know better, everyone should know better, but amongst those who even preach, who talk the talk. Each builds himself a pedestal based on his own exclusive conception of Torah scholarship and avodah. Avodah means practical divine service. In other words, serving God in whatever way it is. So again, his point is that we find this notion of islands, creating islands, and not collaboration when it comes to spiritual divine pursuits. For example, studying Torah and serving God. There is neither bond nor unity between them. In truth, it is of fundamental importance for those who are occupied in Torah and in the service of God to join together and communicate with each other. So the point is, he's saying this is lamentable, this is terrible. If people are, pursuing Torah scholarship and pursuing divine service, and they're isolated, they're in their own echo chambers, that's not okay. Because it's fundamentally important for those occupied in Torah and service of God to join together and communicate with each other. For regarding the study of Torah, and now you know this phrase, right? Because we studied it together a moment ago. For regarding the study of Torah, our sages applied the verse, just as iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. Just as one iron sharpens the other, two sages sharpen each other in halakha and Jewish law. Right? We're very familiar with that quote because we studied it a moment ago. No person can assume on his own that his own perspective is valid. Only when one hears a colleague's opinion and each dialectically debates with another seriously is it possible to arrive at a true view of the matter at hand. One cannot arrive at truth without diversity of opinion and perspective. Similarly, in avoda, the service of worship and personal development, this is basically spiritual development, when people reveal and speak about their inner faults to each other, a number of benefits can be attained. Again, he's advocating for friendships and collaboration. When it comes to Torah scholarship, collaboration leads to deeper ideas and truths. When it comes to avoda, so that's Torah scholarship. Avoda, which is personal refinement and spiritual growth. When it comes to that area of life, when people speak to each other about their challenges, about what weighs on their hearts and what weighs on their minds, many benefits can be attained. The implication here is that if a person truly wants to grow, it's really hard to achieve growth without the input of another and without the help of another. For one thing, and he's going to discuss this on multiple levels, and each one is fascinating. I think I counted 4 or 5 different levels of understanding of why it's important to have others to speak with in order to grow, in order to become a better human being, a better person. Number one, for one thing, okay, let's keep count. 1, each person has certain faults of which he is not aware. For his own self-love dulls his sensitivity. As the verse declares, love covers all faults.
Rabbi,
Yes.
then there's the opposite thing of being too much aware of your faults and no self-love, which is also extremely detrimental. So where's the, stressing
Yeah.
your faults too much is also not so good in terms of
I agree.
self-love.
Yeah. So today we're focusing on this side. We'll have another opportunity to focus on that side. Yeah, life is a balance. You know what they say about a well-balanced Jew? Someone who has a chip on both of their shoulders. So yeah, you need balance, of course. But today we're talking about one side of the equation. We're talking about the detriments, the dangers of self-love to the point that we don't see our own faults, or maybe we see them, but we don't take them seriously. A person says, yeah, I know I have this thing to work on, but it's not a big deal. I'll work on it another day, tomorrow, or whenever I get around to it. The value of having a good friend who's not afraid to be a contrarian, I'm saying not afraid to tell you the way it really is. He's not advocating a friend that's an echo chamber. That's off the table. I'm talking about a friend who's not afraid to tell you what's going on. So having that friend is good because no human being, no one can, we can't, everyone has a blind spot or blind spots. And the thing about blind spots is we don't know where they are. That's why we call them blind spots. Not only don't we see, but we don't know that we don't see those. Because if you knew it, it wouldn't be a blind spot anymore. If you knew that you had this challenge, it's not called a blind spot. It's called an awareness of a challenge, of a fault. We're talking about a blind spot, which means that you don't know that it exists. And we don't know what we don't know. So we could pretend like if we don't know, it doesn't exist. That's like the kid who says, I can't hear you, you're not saying anything. Or we can be mature and say, I know that I have stuff, and I can't see it. And the truth is, I don't even know that I have stuff, because if I knew it, then maybe I could see it. But I imagine that because I know stuff about other people that they don't know, I can imagine that other people know stuff about me that I don't know. Right? So that, you would think. And therefore, let me have a good schmooze with somebody else and ask them, in a moment of honest, vulnerable truth, tell me, what do I need to work on? Who does that? We call that a fabrengen. Yeah. A fabrengen is a Chassidic gathering where people gather around and become vulnerable. That's what it is.
Festivus.
Yeah.
Festivus from
Oh,
Seinfeld.
Festivus. Oh.
You don't know about that?
No. But I feel like I should.
Sharing of grievance.
Sharon of grievances
Oh
with the
my
other person.
gosh, that's epic.
It's not so pretty though.
No, but that's not about unloading on the other
Oh.
person. No, it's not. No. It's about a collective spirit of self-improvement, and each of us helping the other person. Not saying like, I've been meaning to tell you this for a while, but I can't stand. It's not about ego, right? It's about helping. It's about loving, about caring about the other person, and helping them see something and achieve a breakthrough for themselves. It's all in the spirit of camaraderie. I can't say it. Can't say it nicer. Camaraderie. So, yeah, it's such a powerful thing. I always forget the name. The what's the effect?
Don Kruger.
Dunning-Kruger.
Dunning-Kruger.
Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yes.
Yes?
Dunning-Kruger.
That says that people that think they know typically know the least?
Yes.
Something like that?
Or
That's
it's the less you know, the more you
You
can't
think
tell you don't know.
Yes.
The less you know, yes, exactly. The less you know, the less you can tell that you don't know.
Right.
In other words, the more you think you know.
Yes.
The less you know, the more likely that you are to think that you do know.
And the opposite is true. The more you know, the more you understand how much more there is to know.
Yes. So if we're truly self-aware, then we'll know not just what we know, but we'll know that there's a lot that we don't know. And it's not only information, but it's about character. And we'll know that there are things about us that could really be improved, but we may not be seeing them. And therefore, others can highlight them in a loving way, not in a negative. None of this is negative. It's all about a shared desire for growth. What a beautiful, community this would be, lived in accordance with this, with Heichaltzu. You guys agree with me on this? Yes. No reason why we can't make it happen. We're doing it. I'm just saying, it's amazing. It's kind of beautiful.
I think that's what Chabad is.
It's the goal here. Yeah. Right? I mean, that's the goal. Okay. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So we're still in the middle of this. So the problem is that love covers all faults. Right? Self-love, ava techasa p'shayim in the original. Love covers all faults. And the problem is, again, we may not see it, or even if we see it, it may not be considered a fault. It's a feature, suddenly. And that's how I like it. Wonderful. But objectively, through the lens of an objective perspective, it may not be such a feature. It may be something to work on. So that's where friendship comes in. That's where having someone to speak to in an honest, vulnerable way is very important. Again, or maybe not again, I don't know where we're up to. So I'm just going to start from, again, on page 19, 3 lines from the bottom, last word on the line. This surely applies to one's shortcomings with regard to various character traits. In other words, the message, once again, from Mishlei, from Proverbs, King Solomon, of love covers all faults. I'm sorry. In the context of Mishlei, I believe it is in the context of relationships, which says when you're in love with someone, so you don't even notice their faults. It's the way it is. It's when you're not so in love with them that it becomes annoying. Right? The same things that originally in the relationship were like quirks, like, oh, it's so interesting, like they do this, that, the other, it's so cute. Now it's like, it's so annoying. What changed? What changed is the level of open love that you have for the other. How into them are you? Right? So when you're really into them, so they have no faults. When that goes away, then suddenly the faults come to the surface, even though they might have been there the whole time. So, what he wants to do here is apply it to our own character development. And he says, spiritual and character development. He says this surely applies to one's shortcomings with regard to various character traits, i.e., that one's innate self-love masks them, and top of page 20, and another person will help him by bringing them to his attention. So love covers all faults is not only about relationships, but it's about our relationship with ourselves, that our self-love covers all of our own faults, and therefore we can't truly see them. If we can't see them, then we're not truly going to work on them. And if we seek to truly become better, and why wouldn't we want to become better? That's a good thing. If we want to really become better people, better human beings, better spiritual beings, better custodians of God's beautiful reality, then it only makes sense to seek out guidance for and correction for our shortcomings. And the only way to do that is through the lens of others. Because love covers all faults. We can't see it alone. Hence, the importance of camaraderie and friendship and collaboration and vulnerability and honesty. Because without these things, we're staying stuck where we were. So when it comes to Torah scholarship, we need others to sharpen ideas and present other truths that we didn't see on our own. That's Torah scholarship. When it comes to personal character development, we need collaboration and friendship in order to, number one, see our faults and work on them. Number two, furthermore, page 20, furthermore, when a person reveals his inner faults, he feels greater remorse than he felt before speaking. In other words, if we're in a conversation, a real, honest, vulnerable conversation with another human being, and we reveal to them our struggles and our challenges in an honest and open way, in a non-edited way. We're not trying to protect ourselves and our ego, but we're being completely honest about our own stuff that we're dealing with. When that happens, a person feels it to a greater extent than before they shared it. In other words, the pain is felt more acutely when it's shared than when it's still in our heads. And that pain can be a catalyst for growth and change. That's where he's going with this. This stronger sense of regret over all past faults leads him to totally uproot his desire for them, thereby correcting his soul considerably. Again, what he's saying is, when a person has a friend that they can speak with, and a person is not afraid of being vulnerable, a person does not feel the need to be perfect in that person's eyes, to be better than them, so how can I share my faults if I need to be perfect? Are you with me on this? Yeah. Sorry for introducing maybe a new twist on this, but this is really the point that he's saying. If a person is able to be vulnerable and say to another human being, I am not perfect, and here's why, or here's how, and is able to share their stuff, then that person will feel it more strongly, more acutely, and that will lead to, hopefully lead to that person correcting what needs to be corrected. The confessions of sins, he says, the notion of vidui always must be verbal. By the way, this is not confession as it exists in perhaps other religious beliefs. This means when one is talking about to God or to themselves, when one is thinking about one's indiscretions, a person is meant to verbalize them. Why? Because verbalization makes it real and makes it be felt more acutely. This corrects the soul of the sinner to a great degree. For the verbalization of one's sin strikes the innermost chords of his soul, causing him to feel great pain and regret. So the great pain and regret happens through verbalization. Our sages explained a similar concept in their commentary on the verse, and this is what we had on the second page of our Talmudic excerpt. The verse says, worry, that's translated here differently. Worry in the heart bows it down. Okay, again, a different translation here. The Hebrew word yashchena suggests a similar verb yasichena, meaning speak of it. Thus, the verse can be interpreted to mean, if there is worry in the heart of man, let him tell others about it. At the time one talks about his troubles, his pain becomes greater, but afterwards he feels better. That's how he explains in this text what the Talmud says about sharing our worries with others. Right, so the Talmud, let's go back to the Talmud. The Talmud says two opinions, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi. Two opinions on what to do with worry and anxiety and concern in one's heart. One says, push it away. Push it out of your mind. And the other one says, share it with another. And so pushing it away makes sense. Hard to do, maybe impossible, but it makes sense why that would help. But what about the notion of sharing it with others? How does that help? So here he explains, how does it help? Because when you verbalize it, when you share this idea, when you share your concerns, your struggles with another person, what happens is the pain, your pain becomes greater, but because it's greater, it's magnified, it's real now. So because it's real and it's revealed and it's out there for someone else to see and to pick up and to look at. Because of that, you feel the pain to a greater extent, and because of that, you might actually work on it.
In other words, sharing is caring?
Basically. Lessons from a 4-year-old. Sharing is caring.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
in this paragraph, there's reference to, when you're talking about worry, there's reference to fault and sin.
Yes.
Is it intended to have those all be thought about as the same? Because it seems that when you're talking about a fault, you're not necessarily talking about a sin, but the paragraph goes from faults to sins and then troubles. And I'm troubled by the putting everything all together. I know that this is...
First of all, I didn't write this, so it's not my fault.
Okay.
Yeah, fault and sin, no, good question. Just to understand what he's saying.
Yeah.
Fault and sin are synonymous in this context, and I can explain that in a moment. Fault and sin are synonymous, and he's drawing a parallel, not an exact, direct message, but a parallel from the Talmudic discussion about worries, problems. He's drawing a parallel from that back to fault. So let me break it down. So we're talking about inner character development and spiritual development, which means a person is looking at themselves, again, theoretically. We're saying the person cannot be trusted to do this on their own, but let's say theoretically, a person would look inside and say, you know what, I've fallen short in these areas. There are certain things that I'm doing that's incorrect. Certain stuff I'm doing that's not where I need to be, and there are certain things that I should be doing that I'm not yet doing. So we would call that fault. In other words, not blame fault like it's your fault, but fault as in indiscretion, things that we're doing that's not so kosher, which is the same thing as sin, although sin has maybe a heavier connotation. At its core, the word chet means shortcoming. In Hebrew, the word chet doesn't mean necessarily like blatant, evil commission of sin. It can mean something as simple as falling short of one's potential. So fault, sin, indiscretion, not maximizing our potential for growth, it's all the same, it's all under the same banner. So fault, sin, it's all the same thing. What it means is does a person have the ability to truly recognize the areas that they need to improve on? That's our question. And the answer is, it's better if you have someone to talk about this with and to work with this on. Why? Number one, the first point is, we can't see it alone. So others can help us see it. Number two is when we verbalize it with someone else, even if we do see it, verbalizing it makes it more immediate and makes it more, I need to work on this. Like I can push things off in my own head, but when I verbalize it and I realize like how much I really do need to work on it, it's a call to action. So number one, it brings out ideas. It helps reveal my blind spots. Number two, it's a call to action. It makes things more immediate because it makes it more acute. And he's drawing a parallel to this idea with the notion of what the Talmud says regarding concern and worries. Yeah. That when a person is troubled about something, which could be about, I'm worried about the future, or I'm worried about this idea or that challenge or whatever, or I'm worried about myself. Worry could also be worry about one's own stuff that they need to work on. Mm-hmm. That's also possible. So it's not necessarily the same as the fault and sin, but it doesn't necessarily have to be different either. The point is, the Talmud says that either push it away or verbalize it, and he's explaining here what is the power of verbalizing one's fears or worries to another. It's because the pain gets greater in the moment, but afterwards it becomes better.
I think sometimes too, like a fault and a sin are not always the same thing. I think sins are more ethics and morals, whereas faults might not always be about that. Like maybe, what if you don't exercise enough? That could be a fault. What if you smoke cigarettes? That's not unethical to smoke cigarettes. It's just a fault. It's something that you want to work on. You know what I mean? Or maybe you don't eat enough vegetables. That's a fault that you might want to work on. You know what I mean? It doesn't imply, it's not, oh, I sinned, I didn't eat enough broccoli. See, that's not
Right.
necessarily what's going on.
Right.
A sin and a fault are not the same thing. I think a sin is definitely more about ethics, whereas a fault can just be more like a character flaw.
Makes sense.
You know?
I like that.
You know?
Yeah, but both, no, that makes sense. But both could be helped, right, with the input of others.
Absolutely.
So that,
Yeah, so I'm thinking that one can extend this to the challenges of a single life, i.e. not married, as well as the benefits of married life.
If we embrace,
profound.
so 2 points. Number one, this is true when we have good chaverim, good friends, which either could be found which could happen within the context of that type of relationship, or might not. A person could be married and not have that openness and vulnerability to speak with their significant other. A person could have that in that relationship, or could not have that. And a person who's not in that type of relationship could have a relationship with others, friends, contemporaries, in which that is there. But you're right. There is, I think, ideally, the way I would phrase it is, the ideal of close relationships is that we have those types of conversations with them and we're open to them. I mean, how beautiful of a thing that we would have egoless relationships. That would be kind of cool.
I mean,
right?
You know,
that we're seeking each other's growth. That would be amazing.
I mean, you know, we talk. There's the common phrase that our children are our teachers, but how about our spouse is our teacher?
Yeah, that's also true.
That's incredible.
If
I'm thinking about the movies from the line, Jack Nicholson, you make me want to be a better man.
Right.
I think that's one of the main things about marriage is that you help each other grow, because that constant rubbing, you know, you guys are, you know, marriage is inevitably, if you're married to someone long enough, you're going to have points that you disagree with the person. And I think a lot of times those disagreements definitely help you grow with the person. I'll be the first person to say my wife has helped me grow immensely, you know, and hey, you're kind of, maybe you need to work on this or something. And I might get a little mad about it at first, you know what I mean? But then I'll be like, oh, yeah, she's right. You know?
She'll never tell her that.
When the conversation with my wife starts out, you know how you tell me that I make you want to be a better man? When she starts out with something, I know that we're about to have a discussion.
It's about to get real.
She's always right.
Does it ever work the other way?
We're on camera. You may want to be careful.
I'm looking at my boss. I'm not talking about her.
Right. No, that's a good answer. That's actually a good answer. But look, whether it's in that by the way, a lot of conflict would be avoided if that was the perspective, that each one was seeking the betterment of the other and growth and that sort of thing. That's a great model for relationships in general. But again, even if someone's not married and not in that type of relationship, a person can have that and is encouraged to have that in the context of a good friend, of a good chaver. And some people may be married but not for whatever reason, not have that in their spouse or in their mate, but have that with a friend. And that's fine. Farbrengens, I used the word farbrengen before, are not necessarily couples. It's community. It's so it doesn't have to be, but it could be, and it's a beautiful thing if it is. Now, let's continue in this second paragraph on page number 20. So here we go. Let's start kind of right in the middle of the page, where it says, at the time one talks. At the time one talks about his troubles, his pain becomes greater, but afterwards he feels better. Similarly, in Avodah, now he transfers it back to faults and sins. When one talks about one's inner faults, he feels greater pain at the time, but afterwards he feels better, for many flaws and sins have thereby been removed. Interesting. He says, like, it's almost like magic. You talk about it and it's removed. Obviously there's no magic, but what it means is that the healing process can begin, or the correction can begin, once one feels that it needs to be corrected. Listen, the greatest obstacle to correction is not embracing that it needs to be corrected. That's the first step. The first step is acknowledging there's something to be corrected. And when we're stuck in our own heads with our own self-love, it's kind of hard, number one, to see it. And even if we see it, it's kind of hard to say, I really need to get down to work over here. But when we verbalize it and we bring it out into the open, so not only can others help us see the faults, but it becomes more real to us, and that's the first step toward correction. Feeling that the need for correction is the first step to correction. We're not going to correct what we don't feel we need to correct. That's the axiom. Okay, next, third paragraph. Furthermore, this is point number 3. When people discuss spiritual improvement, each one proposes means of correcting flaws, and they can jointly resolve to correct certain aspects of their behavior. Okay, in the Hebrew, I saw this as two different things in this paragraph, in this one paragraph. But here it's kind of being pushed into one thing, which is fine, but I'll share with you maybe both ways of understanding this. One way of understanding this first line is that when you share your stuff with other people, so they can help you chart a path of correction that you could not have charted on your own. In other words, another person can help you with tools for correction that you perhaps didn't see or don't have on your own. Make sense? In other words, a solution. Until now, we've been talking about how sharing it highlights the problem. Either it tells you the problem that you didn't see, or it brings it out more acutely. But now let's talk about solutions. Collaborating with others helps you come to other solutions that you might not have seen on your own. Right? Two heads together are better than one. So when you have collaboration, suddenly now, not only do you know the problem, but you have a greater awareness of the solution. And I think there's a fourth point. This next sentence, I think, is point number 4. And then when you make the resolution, he's going through kind of like the life cycle of self-improvement or improvement. And then when a person sees the stuff that they need to work on, feels that it's important to work on it, collaborates with another on the solution of what to do, and then makes a resolution. Point number 4, a resolution reached by 2 or more people is more lasting than a resolution made by one person alone. When you share your resolution with someone else, there's accountability. Whereas if you just were in your own head the whole time, you may not see the problem, you may not feel it, you may not come up with creative solutions, and any resolutions that you made, only you know about it, you can break it, and none's the wiser or something, and no one else knows about it.
Is this at all related to also the stuff like the minion having like a you can't do it by yourself?
There are certain things in Jewish law and Jewish practice that we can't do alone. We have to have kind of a quorum. But this is more about, kind of personal development, which could draw on that truth of community, and I think does. This idea is that when you make a resolution in somewhat of a, I'm going to say public setting, but I don't mean like, on Facebook. I mean in a setting where there's another person that cares about you, that knows about it, then there's accountability. Thus, it is obvious that many benefits result when those who serve God combine their efforts. Someone who's sincere about personal growth, spiritual growth, serving God, that person should seek out connecting with other people. Number 1, for Torah scholarship, ideas are sharpened. And 2, for personal growth. You see, we can become aware of our faults that we didn't see through our blind spots, because of our blind spots. We can feel them more acutely and recognize the need to correct them. We can come up with more creative solutions for correcting them, and we're held accountable when we share with others. Now, here's the key. Last paragraph 20. This is only possible if one possesses the quality of bittul, if one is humble, and is capable of coming close and becoming one with another person, i.e. becoming vulnerable with somebody else, sharing, being open, revealing one's inner challenges. That takes a lot of courage. But if one is dominated by yeshus, by ego, it is impossible for him to reveal his inner faults to someone else. If he has a low opinion of others, let's say ego manifests that I think everyone else is a fool, right? That guy, right? So if he has a low opinion of others, how can he reveal his affairs to him, and what purpose will it serve? I'm not going to stoop down to share my stuff with someone that I consider to be inferior, and even if I do, what benefit, what can they possibly tell me that's a benefit? If I look at them, if God forbid I look down at someone else, right? How could the fundamental reason I'm going to focus on this for a second. If he has a low opinion of others, how can he reveal his affairs to him? Because in order for you to be higher and for them to be lower, you have to be more perfect than they are. So now you're going to tell them about your flaws and risk evening the playing field? Or maybe now you realize that maybe you're less than them? Can't have that happen. In your whole construct of ego, you have to be better than others. So then of course you're perfect. You don't have any flaws that you're ever going to reveal to anyone else. Because you have to maintain that ego. You have to maintain that dominance. You have to maintain that whole persona. You see what ego does? It robs us of the greatest tool for self-development. Our greatest tool for self-development is collaboration with others. And ego robs us of the guts, of the courage to share. And it tells us, what's the point anyway? How could they possibly help me? What do they know? Okay, let's continue. The fundamental reason, again, 2 lines from the bottom of 20. The fundamental reason, however, for this attitude is that he cannot become one with someone else. In other words, it all comes back to ego. It all comes back to ego. For in Torah study, he stubbornly defends his opinion and thinks that his wisdom and knowledge is truth. And he's now cycling back to the two ideas. With regards to Torah study, a person says, why do I need someone else anyway? My ideas are always sound. My ideas are true. So I need to discuss with someone else. They should be lucky if they learn from me. He refuses to accept another opinion or even consider it impartially without prejudice. When people discuss an idea in this manner, they draw further apart and become opponents. You see that? In this, if a person views themselves through the lens of ego and views the other as irrelevant, intellectually irrelevant, then when they discuss ideas with others, all it does is prove the point that that person doesn't know what they're talking about. And it drives us further away. This disagreement in turn becomes a reason for preventing further cooperation and joining together. For he said such and so on. Why should I ever have another conversation and try to work with them again? Last time I tried, you know what they said? Are you with me on this? The cycle continues. What's the moral of the story? What?
I said live alone in a cave.
Yeah, what could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? We'll be the wisest and the most refined people in the world.
Don't forget to vote.
The moral of the story is, it's not politics. The moral of the story is as follows. The moral of the story is that collaboration leads to greater wisdom and scholarship in Torah, and collaboration leads to greater growth in one's spiritual service and character development. And collaboration is only possible when we have a measure of bittul, a measure of humility. When we're able to tell ourselves, first and foremost, maybe there's something wise that person can tell me. Maybe I can benefit from sharing with that other person. If we tell ourselves that person has their ideas are not good and they can't help me because who are they anyway? When we tell ourselves that, again, we rob ourselves of things that are simply to our own benefit, i.e. greater scholarship and greater personal development. So, again, let's close out and we can have more discussions afterwards. The moral of the story is friendship. As Barney said, I love you, you love me. We're best friends as friends could be. with a great big hug.